Tansi Atawia. How are you doing today? My English name is Janet Smiley. I am a Métis family doctor and Indigenous health scientist. I am truly honored to be introducing Elder Albert Dumont, Southwind, and his Forest Walk video. This video is a gift from Elder Albert and the Well Living House to the Unity Health Network in celebration of National Indigenous Peoples Day. Albert Dumont, Southwind, is a poet, storyteller, environmental activist, and an Algonquin traditional teacher. He was born in traditional Algonquin Territory, Kitigan Zibi. He has been walking the Red Road since commencing his sobriety in 1988. Ottawa's Poet Laureate from 2021 to 2023, Elder Albert has published books of poetry, short stories, and children's books. He has dedicated his life to promoting Indigenous spirituality and healing and to protecting the rights of Indigenous peoples, particularly the young. He is the father of 4 daughters, grandfather of 5 grandchildren, and great-grandfather to 2 great-grandchildren. He has a long track record of community service and many public recognitions, and an honorary doctorate in education from the University of Ottawa. Well Living House is an action research center that aims to nurture places and spaces where Indigenous children, youth, adults, and elders can find peace, love, and joy. We do this by advancing generative health services for Indigenous peoples. Well Living House is co-governed by a council of Indigenous grandparents who guide us culturally and spiritually and ensure that the work we do is of tangible benefit to Indigenous peoples. We have greatly benefited from Elder Albert's wise counsel and spiritual mentorship since he joined our Grandparents Counsel in 2017. Elder Albert transitioned to the role of honorary grandparent in the fall of 2024. In August of 2024, during a retreat at the Kingbridge Center in King City, Elder Albert took us on a forest walk. This video shares our spiritual journey and teachings.
Hey dear friends, it's Albert Dumont. You're about to see a film, or segments of a film of a walk I did with Janet Smiley and Well Living House, and we had such a great time in the forest. You know, there's a purity, there's a wisdom, and there's truth in the forest that just no human being could possibly possess. Everything is there to help in healing. Take it from me as somebody who was a recovering alcoholic and who needed the spirit and energy of the forest to stay strong in my vow of sobriety. You're going to hear a lot more than that though, and just I wish you a happy viewing, and you know, if you see me around someplace, please say hello, because I really appreciate when people say hi. Miigwech.
So there's a dead tree, no more leaves. It still has its bark, but eventually the bark is all going to fall off of it. You're going to see another tree that's like that over there, and then the branches will start falling off of it. Then the bottom half, the top half will fall off. Then the bottom half will be there for quite a long time. Then it will fall down too at some point. And then it will slowly decay and go back to the land and feed the earth, as they say. Anyway, so one time I was in the forest in Canoe Park, and I brought tobacco, and I came to a spot, and I made a circle, and I sat in the center of the circle. The circle was maybe about 30 feet in diameter. And I sat in the center of the circle, and I asked for something that I would share with groups in the future. So I'm sitting there, and let's say an hour passed and not much was going on. Then all of a sudden I seen this squirrel, and it seemed to be in a panic. It was racing for all it was worth, and it went to a dead tree that was in the circle, and it climbed up the tree. And I said to myself, okay, the squirrel, was probably being chased by a weasel or maybe by a fisher, and it had to save itself, and it went to a dead tree, and it went up, and whatever was chasing it, the fox or couldn't climb up there. And I said to myself, well, the squirrel represents me or you, and whenever you're in danger or of harm, you got to remember your ancestor, because the tree, it sprouted to life. Maybe the tree that was in my circle maybe sprouted to life a couple of hundred years ago, maybe 250 years ago, whatever, and then it died. It lived out its life, and then it died. But it's still there. It's still there, and to save that squirrel, to save you, to save me, you know, it's like. We should never ever forget the people of our bloodlines, whatever your bloodline is. It's whenever you look at your bloodline and you see a picture of from the 1800s of a relative of yours, you got to think about, not just think about, hey, that's my ancestor. Well, that person had grandparents, and their grandparents had grandparents. So the bloodline goes back thousands of years, and we need to acknowledge all of them, because does anybody here want our future generations to forget about us just because we've been dead a long time? I don't want my bloodline ever to forget about me, no matter how long I've been dead. So to me, that's what came to me that day when that squirrel ran up the tree. It was probably a fox that was chasing it, because a fox can't climb the tree after it, eh? So it's good to just to remember the importance of acknowledging your ancestors. Even if you have if your bloodline is a mixture, well you acknowledge the good people of your bloodline on both sides of it, regardless of the culture or heritage of those people. So I just wanted to say that before we get into the forest. You know, the forest is a place of medicine for anything. It's got cures for emotional health. It's got cures for spiritual wellness, for physical wellness. There's nothing that the forest doesn't have that's going to make a human being well. The Algonquin creation story speaks mostly about a time in the spiritual world before Creator got the idea of creating human beings. The way that I heard it spoken was that Creator sent out an energy of love into the universe. After a period of time, there was no response. So Creator knew that the only thing to do would be to create something that could produce the energy of love. And so Creator decided to create the human beings. And the Creator knew that the human beings were going to be helpless, that they would need help to live their lives. So Creator spoke to all the spirits of the spiritual world and said the plan to create a human being. And Creator asked the spirits who was willing to help them. And a spirit came forward and said, I will help the human beings to live by becoming something that will be known as a fish, and I will live in water, and human beings could harvest me out of the water, and they could eat my flesh. Another spirit came forward and said, I will help the human beings to live by becoming something that will be known as a maple tree, and I will offer sap and sweet water that human beings can make into syrup, and I will help the human beings live that way. So on and on and on it went, until finally Creator said, okay, everybody was in agreement. So Creator put all those things on Mother Earth first, and then human beings came last. So whenever we do ceremony, and the Anishinaabe do ceremony, we always acknowledge all those things first because they came first. And we put ourselves last. And a mistake is made in this planet whenever human beings starting putting these things last and themselves first. And that's why there's pollution. So we'll do a circle here. Maybe Janet could be by my right. Then you could smudge. Whoever wants to, are you going to be in a circle for smudging? Yeah. Maybe we'll be a little bit closer. I just want to say this about the circle is I've experienced so much healing in the circle. I had severe addiction issues till 1988, and if you would have known me in 1987, you would have never believed that I had a chance to sober up because I was in bad shape. But once I never needed to go to AA or to counselors or anything like that. The forest really was who and what I needed. The spirit in the forest. Where water is, where the rapids are, where the falls are, that's what I needed to help me keep strong in my vow to never allow alcohol to pass my lips again. Whenever I think of those years of my addiction, to me I realized one day like that alcohol addiction was like a cancer. That was eating at my spirit. You know, cancer will eat your flesh or eat your organs. Well, that's, you know, whenever you get rid, if somebody has cancer and they get rid of it, they don't want it back. And whenever the addiction was eating at me spiritually, eating at my spirit, and I got rid of it, and I don't want it back. I don't want it back because it was so destructive. And one day I just decided I'd rather give my life purpose than waste my life. And and thank goodness for the circle and for all these things that we call all our relations. It's such a great statement to make, all my relations. It's like a friend of mine said, he said, when you're in the forest, you're never alone because all these things are your relatives. You know, every morning, whenever a human being wakes up, they should say, thank you, Creator, for the health of my family. It didn't take long to say that, but you began your day with a prayer, though. If you don't care about the health of your family, then don't bother investing those 2 or 3 seconds, you know. But everybody cares. I want to say something about the bird seasons. You know, yesterday people that care about me, my family and friends, were acknowledged my birthday. But really, there was a time in the past where there was no such thing as the 26th of a month, or there was no such thing as a Monday or a Thursday or things like that. But there was the 4 seasons and the moons. Everybody was born in one of the 4 seasons. Everybody was born on one of the moons. Today we're in the Blackberry moon. So I went on the land to see what I could learn from the land that would help guide my life. And I saw that the blackberry plant itself, if anybody here knows about, if they've ever picked wild blackberries, that the wild blackberries have the sharpest thorns. Like, I mean, they're even sharper thorns than rose bushes or raspberry bushes. They're very sharp thorns. And what I was taught is that the whatever has sharp thorns like that is protecting medicine. And then the blackberry itself, it's not really all that sweet, and it's not tart. You know, it's a good mixture. It's got a good balance. And partridge love to eat blackberries, but they can't climb on the plant. So whenever a berry over-ripens or the winds knock it down on the forest floor, that's when the partridge gets to eat the blackberries. So here's what I learned. I learned that if I look at the berry as something that I hold sacred, whether it's my family values, my duty as a male of Algonquin ancestry, my duty as a dad of daughters, my duty as the grandfather of 5 grandchildren, that I've got to protect what I hold sacred, just like those thorns are protecting those berries. I'm instructed to do that. And the blackberry teaches me to be balanced in mind, body, and spirit, because the berry is like that. It's got balance and flavor. And then the partridge, waiting for the blackberry to fall on the ground, teaches me to be patient. So just one plant teaches me about patience, about duty to protect what I hold sacred, and to be balanced in mind, body, and spirit. So whatever your birth moon is, go on the land and see what's there to tell you that you're going to learn to conduct yourself as a better human being. Because human beings are so imperfect. No such thing as a perfect human being, and there never will be. You know, I always talk about sometimes about people. Some people, they get good at pointing out somebody's imperfections as if they're perfect, when nobody is. So we need to think about that. And all these, they're the real teachers. There's nothing more wise than these things. I remember one time an old guy came up to me after I had did some teachings, and he comes up to me, he was Indigenous too, and he said to me, "Who's your teacher?" And I said, "The forest is my greatest teacher." And that seemed to upset him. And he goes, "Haven't you learned anything from human beings?" I said, "Yeah, I learned how not to be." And you know, we need to think about that, because these things are pure in spirit. And so we're going to pass some time among these things, and hopefully you'll come out of the forest a little bit wiser than you went in, and we'll have a circle and people could share about what was their favorite part of it. There's a cedar tree right here, and my granddaughter Kirsten, maybe you'll meet her someday, because she's really getting known in Ottawa as an advocate and as an activist, and as a really good keynote speaker on what it's like to be a young person and living in Vanier, where she grew up in Vanier in Ottawa. Anyway, when Kirsten started to walk, she's 24 years old now, but when she started to walk, she was the type of a kid that didn't want to be picked up. She'd say, "No, I could walk." So she was always very independent. And whenever it was the summer that she turned 4 years old, and I said to her one day, I said, "Today we're going to go into the forest, and we're going to find a cedar tree. I'm going to tell you all about the cedar tree." So she said, "Okay." And I knew a trail in Gatineau Park that you had to walk at least 2.5 kilometers before you got to where there was a cedar tree. So I parked the car, and me and her are walking on the trail, and after, you know, she's got little short legs and she's walking along, and after about 1.5 kilometers, she was anxious, I guess, to know where the cedar tree was. So then she pointed at a tree and she says, "Is that a cedar tree?" And I said, "No, that's a maple tree." but let's go over and say hello to the maple tree. I said to her, I said, notice the bark of the maple tree. I said, put your hands on the bark. The maple tree is alive. And I said, look at the leaf of the maple tree. And then we went on. After a while, she pointed to another tree and she said, is that a cedar tree? And I said, no, that's a white birch tree. Let's go over to the white birch tree and say hello to the white birch tree. I want you to notice how the bark is different on the white birch tree than the maple tree. Look at the leaf, how different it is. Then I told her some things about Birch Bark Canoe and this kind of thing. We kept on walking. Came to another part, she pointed to another tree and she says, is that a cedar tree? And I said, no, that's a pine tree. Let's go and look at the pine tree. Look at the bark, how different it is than the others. And look at it, it doesn't have leaves, it's got pine needles. And we went on, and then whenever we got to where the cedar tree was, I took tobacco and I put tobacco offering. I took some cedar and I told her that it was sacred medicine. And I told her how special cedar was to our people, and that, you know, wonderful it smelled, and how you could use it for a bath. You could, you know, smudge with it, and it was sacred, regarded as being sacred. So she learned all that, and we had to walk up this huge hill and back to the car. And when we got back to my place, right away she saw that the cedar hedge right in my driveway, eh? And she shouts out, there was cedar right here, why did we have to walk so far? And I said, well, this cedar is looked after by human beings. The cedar that we went to see is looked after by Creator, and there's a big difference. And so that's the, she never forgot, to this day she'll talk about the day she went to learn about cedar with me. So we'll go in now and see what's next. I don't know if you guys noticed, but whenever we first walked in, I heard a pine beetle.
I'm not sure I'd recognize a pine beetle sound.
Yeah, they're big and they bite too.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So I just want to show you something. So some trees, especially poplars and maples too, whenever the wind blows them and you only see this side of the leaf, that means that they're announcing rain is coming. So whenever you see that, within 24 hours it's going to rain. They're good forecasters of rain. And if you ever hear a loon calling while it's flying, whenever it's calling excitedly as it's flying, the loon is saying to all who could hear it, it's going to rain here. And it always does. That's how our people knew how to prepare for rain and feel confident that there was going to be rain coming. Because these things know, eh? The trees know. The pine beetle is a predictor of heat and humidity when you hear its long, piercing call. Sometimes you'll see an old stump like this, and there'll be a new tree just growing right in the middle of it, and it's like the stump is acting as a midwife for a new tree. And sometimes the stump is so worn down at the ground, you know, you just stand in it, and it's like standing inside of a tree, because it's all decayed. You know, if you put your bare feet in it, you're going to say, wow, does that ever feel good? It's pretty amazing. See here the rapids. The Algonquin belief is that there was a time in the past when human beings didn't know that they had the ability to sing. You know, they were communicating, but the idea of singing, though, they didn't know that they possessed that ability. But one day, an Algonquin, the story doesn't say if it was a woman or a man, but probably was a woman, and she was standing beside the rapids, and she heard the waters singing, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to try that too," and she made song, and the first song. And so it was water that communicated to human beings that they had the ability to sing. So we need to acknowledge those first times. You know, whenever I talk about the Birch Bark Canoe, the greatness of the Birch Bark Canoe, because we had Birch Bark Canoe building down to a science at the time of contact. I honestly believe that the Birch Bark Canoe is a wonder of the world. You know, what greater invention is there than a Birch Bark Canoe? I mentioned that one time at a conference, and I said some of our canoes were long, they could hold a lot of men and cargo, and the canoe could go over whitewater, and it didn't fall apart. That's how well made our canoes were. And there was a man in the audience, and he stands up and he goes, "If you can make big canoes, why didn't you build big ships like the Europeans?" he said. And I said to him, I said, "Because we didn't want to explore for a better place. We knew that where we were, there was no better place on the planet than here." And if, you know, and I said, and all the people that have come here from other countries, they know that too, or they would have stayed in their own country. They came here because they knew there was no better place than here. And that's why people from all over the world line up to become citizens here. So it's important. I just see a crow there, and one of my friends, I gave him the name Blackbird, because he was very dedicated to the inmates at Millhaven Penitentiary. He was worked for corrections, and he's a great communicator, and he knows how to support and to help out, organize. He's just like one of those blackbirds. So he loves his name. Whenever he got that name, we come up to my place and we feasted it, and all was well and good. These ferns sometimes will take over a place, and I don't know if they're the kind of ferns that make fiddleheads, as they're called. I've been hoping to come across a rock that I would gather if, let's say I was going to conduct a purification lodge ceremony. Then I go into the forest, because rocks, the frost, the earth brings them up to the surface. There's rocks. And sometimes you'll find perfect rocks for a purification lodge or a sweat lodge ceremony. And I was mentioning that to some people when I worked at corrections. I said, I don't go to a rock quarry and back my vehicle up to the rocks and put some tobacco down and put all the rocks I'm going to need into the vehicle and then bring them to the ceremonial site. What I do is I'll go into the forest and with tobacco, and whenever I find a rock, I'll pick it up and I'll physically carry it out. Like I don't have a wheelbarrow to do it, and I'll bring it to where my sweat lodge was, and whatever amount of rocks I need. If I need 21 rocks, well then I might make maybe 15 or 16 trips, because sometimes I carry 2, sometimes I only carry 1. And for each rock, I do a ceremony. because the rock, supposing there was a rock there, well, it's been there longer than these trees have been here. It's been there for thousands of years, right? And then here's me coming along and I'm going to take it away. So I acknowledge that. I apologize to it. And I apologize to all its neighbors, because they know that rock is there. I apologize to any deer or squirrel or spider or mouse or whatever that's ever come near it in all the centuries it's been there. And then I really make a big apology for whatever has found sanctuary under it. Because if you lift a rock like that in the forest, there's going to be worms or slugs or ants or something that lives under it. And we got to acknowledge that. You know, that was a sanctuary for them, but now you're taking it away. So whenever I was working at Millhaven with J Unit, I would bring one rock, because I knew the other rocks had been brought to the site by the liaison who went to a rock quarry and brought them to the Millhaven. So on the day that we would do Sweat Lodge, I'd have my bundle and the rock would be in sort of thing. But it was such it was so important for me to have at least one that was brought out of the forest physically and with ceremony. It's such a profound ceremony for each one. We need to think about that, because I prefer to call them ancestor rocks instead of grandfather rocks, because our women were wise and powerful too. I say more powerful and more wise than the males were. So I don't know how it ever began where people were calling them grandfather rocks. I call them ancestor rocks because that makes more sense to me. And I don't want to offend anybody or anything, but I really, you won't hear me say, refer to Creator as him or he, because it's, if Creator did have a gender, Creator would be most certainly female, because it's females that give life, produce life. And some people don't like it when I say that, but that's my belief. You heard me talk about Creator a while ago. I never once said Creator. You referred to Creator as he, because I just can't bring myself to do it. So we just go on. These cedar trees are known as swamp cedar or white cedar. They're the best. See how straight they are? So if somebody was building a cedar log home, and that's where they would get, because cedar doesn't shrink like pine does. Pine logs, when you use them, they will shrink about 5 inches over the course of about 5 years. So the builder takes that into consideration when they install the windows and how whatever they do around the window, because they know it's going to come down, right? And they adjust the stairs accordingly, because the floor is going to go down with the logs, right? I'm going to share a memory. I think whenever I was 11 and I was with my brother, who was a year older than me, and it was in the springtime, and we had slingshots with us, and we were in the forest. And it was at that point in the springtime where the earth is very soft, because the snow is melted and the land is kind of spongy. So you could walk along very silently, because you're not making any noise. Even the twigs will sink into the earth under your feet. And and because there's no leaves on the trees yet, sound carries far. So we heard a very scary sound. And I didn't want anything to do with the sound. If the sound was coming from that way, I said to my brother, let's go this way. But he was born in the springtime, and usually spring babies are very curious and adventurous, and they just have to know. And he said, no, I want to know what's making that sound. So let's go to where the sound is. And we went to where the sound was coming from, and it turned out that it was a tree, a huge pine tree that had lived several hundred years, and then it died. The bark all fell off of it. The branches all fell off. The bottom part fell off. The bottom part, though, was still standing there, and there was holes like this. Big ones, though. Big holes on the side of the tree, and the core of the tree was hollow. And what had happened is that a porcupine had tried to get into the hole, and it got stuck. It couldn't go any deeper, and it couldn't back out. You see, the porcupine used to fit in the hole before because the tree was in its territory. But as the porcupine was getting older, it was getting wider in some areas. And so it was stuck. And it was bawling, and the sound of its bawling was going up through the core of the tree and coming out like a giant trumpet, you know, very amplified. That was the sound we heard from far away. And my brother says to me, he says, we're going to help that porcupine get in the hole. And I said, how are we going to do that? He's a porcupine, we can't push on him. And my brother said, no, just load your slingshot and fire at will. So we only had to hit him in the rump a couple of times, and he tried a little bit harder, and then he got in, right? And then he could go up and out. So whenever I thought about that memory many years ago, and I said to myself, let's look at the hole in the tree as a problem we have in life. And let's look at the porcupine as the solution to that problem. So what we need to keep in mind is that the solution that might have fit in my generation is not going to fit in yours because of technology, and life has changed, right? The same problem, but the solution is a bit different. So whenever you're counseling, you need to take that into consideration to offer the best counsel for whoever it is that you're counseling. Because it no longer fits, just like that porcupine didn't fit anymore. And I'll bet you never tried to go into the hole again after that experience. Yeah, a lot of cedar here. That's all white cedar. That's pretty amazing. One time when I worked at Millhaven, you see this beautiful little flower? Well, the caretaker on the native grounds had cut the lawn, and myself and the inmates were doing a circle. And I saw that, let's say the grass was only that long, well, there was little flowers like that, and they were even shorter than the grass. So I said to the men, I said, I want you guys to look on the ground and tell me what you see. And they were all like this, looking around. Nobody was saying anything. And after a while, I said, hey, I said, do you not see those flowers? And they're looking, oh yeah, I see the flowers. And I said, so why didn't you notice them before? And they said, some of them said, oh, because they're so small. And I said, whenever human beings fail to see that beauty, then they gotta wonder why Spirit would care to see us whenever we're not seeing that beauty. You know, why would Creator, why would the good Spirit, Minu Manitou, see us? So it's like that story about the fish that lost its glitter because it was living in stagnant water. You know, we're losing our glitter spiritually, and we need to keep it well and bright, because I know that as a grandfather, my grandchildren will not lose their glitter if I have anything to do with it. Can somebody piggyback me up this trail? I know a guy from Temagami, an artist. He does paintings, and he also does carving, a lot of carving. And he built his wife of many years her dream home. And I don't know how many times he went to the forest, but she always wanted a circular staircase. And he built a circular staircase, and with the with cedar branches that had the right turn in them. So like I say, I don't know how long it took him to do that, but it's a beautiful railing he made. I just wanted you to take note of this black birch right here, right in front of Janet. So that's the special tree. You know, you guys are involved with medical research and things like this. So when I first was going up to Liverandry Park after my sobriety began, and I made friends with the Algonquins who live in the park, the old lady up there, Lena Jerome, told me the experience she had when she was a young woman. And she'd had a baby, and the baby was sickly, and it looked like the baby was going to die. So she brought the baby to the doctor, and the doctor told her there was nothing could be done. He said, you got to prepare yourself to deal with the death of your son. So she didn't accept that. She went back to the community. Her and her husband and the baby went into the forest, and they built a lean-to, and then they took the inner bark of the yellow birch and they boiled it, and then they gave the baby a bath in it, and they had a little sponge, I guess, a rag, and they dunked it into the water and squeezed it over the baby's mouth, along with acknowledging the spirit of the tree, along with making a request of ancestors, along with being grateful to the good spirit, Minu Manitou and Creator, for everything. And after doing that for almost 2 days, the baby regained his strength enough to suckle. And then he got stronger and he was healed. The next spring, that doctor was visiting that community, and he asked the neighbor, he says, how did Lena Jerome deal with the death of her son? And they said, oh, the baby survived, he's healthy. So the doctor went over to Lena's house, and she told me this. She said he knocked on her door. She went to the door, and the doctor says, what did you do to save the baby's life? And she says, you told me that there was no hope, and now you're at my door saying, you know, how did you do it? You know, well, I don't even want to talk to you, you know, because you took hope from me when the hope was there. So she didn't want to talk to the doctor, and she didn't. I often say it at conferences, and I mentioned it with Well Living House, that I can't say that there needs to be a trust that needs to be re-established, because there's never been a trust, honestly, between Indigenous people and the healthcare system. Like my father used to say, nobody can kill you quicker than a doctor. And they believed it, you know, that they said that because that's what they believed. They believed it. So things need to be done more to get that trust factor going. Because there's racism, and I haven't seen it around the grassroots community. And whenever I say the grassroots community, I'm talking about truck drivers and people like that in the community of different cultures. But in hierarchy areas, though, it's alive and well. We got to understand that and do what we can to make it stop. I just want to add something here. You know, the leaves when they're on trees, like the maple has its own song when the wind moves it, and it has its own song because of the shape that it has. My mother used to say that the song of the poplar trees could lull her to sleep. She said, if you ever want to have a nice nap in the afternoon, go and lay down beside a poplar tree when there's a gentle breeze, and then benefit from it. So all the leaves make different sounds, like the willow leaf is shaped a certain way, and the birch and whatever other trees that have leaves, and they all sing. And they all sing their own unique song, and to me, they're saying to human beings, you have a right to sing your own song. Not just the song of not superior people, but the ones that are more, majority. You don't sing their song just because they expect you to. You got to sing your own song, and I think you know how to define that yourself. One day I was in the forest, and it was in the fall time, and there was a breeze, and I saw and heard the leaves as they were racing on the forest floor, hundreds or thousands of them, just moving along with the wind. And it was a beautiful sound to hear those leaves traveling like that. And I said to myself, I can't say, oh, I think I just heard a maple leaf. You know, it's all together, harmony, right? And how important it is to when things are in harmony and how we benefit from it. I was with teachers one time, and I was doing a forest walk with them. And we came to a place where there was a rocky landscape. And even though the landscape was rocky and there wasn't hardly any topsoil there was 5 varieties of trees. There was a pine tree, there was a white birch, a yellow birch, a cedar, and a balsam fir. And they were all big and doing well. And I said to the teachers, it just dawned on me to say it, I didn't plan on it, I didn't know even to say anything like that till that day. I said, we need to understand that in this place where there's lots of rock, that there's hardly any topsoil, but yet the trees are big and strong, and that's because the roots of the white birch are interlocking or connecting with the roots of the pine tree, and the pine tree's roots are interlocking with the balsam fir, and so on. And so they're locked with each other and they're supporting each other. And a big wind could come and the tree's not going to topple over because it's being supported. So I said to the teachers, that's like your classroom. In your classroom, you've got somebody that represents the pines, somebody that represents the white birch, somebody represents the yellow birch, and so on. I said, they come from all over the world. They're in your classroom. And what you got to respect as a teacher is that they need to be treated equally and support them. And they will grow up to be as healthy and as beautiful and as magnificent as these trees that are here. I know that if I was a teacher, honestly, if I was a teacher, and then the first day of September when school would start, and let's say I had 20 students in my classroom, I would say, if I have anything to do with it, nobody in this classroom is going to grow up to be a gangster or a drug addict. Nobody in this classroom, if I have anything to do with it, is going to grow up to be involved with a criminal element. Not if I have anything to do with it. And I would be dedicated to that. Because if I'm going to be with these kids for 10 months, and in those 10 months I can shape and mold their ethics and their character, I'm going to do it, you know? And teachers need to take that seriously, instead of just going through the motions of teaching. Nobody is better than anybody else. And whenever a teacher hears somebody speaking that way, they need to call that person out and tell them, you're wrong. Nobody's better. I used to like to climb trees like that when I was a kid.
How far up would you go?
Right up to the top.
No way. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did your mom know that? At the
No,
time? Yeah.
no. White birch. Have you ever heard of birch bark biting? The Algonquins are well known for designs in birch bark biting. It's really coming back, and Kitigan Zibi has quite a few people now that are doing birch bark biting. The birch trees, might seem to you like a big birch tree, but at the time of contact, they were probably 3 or 4 times more round than that. And that's why they were able to make canoes with them. All the things that made a birch bark canoe, the cedar ribbing, they would even use eel skin to tie the top, you know, at the bow. So there's lots of things involved. And one thing about traveling in a birch bark canoe, it's not like traveling in a car. If your car breaks down, what do? But if you're in a canoe and the canoe breaks down somehow, there's damage somehow, just pull up to the shore and walk into the forest and get what you need. It's right there. There's no... It's a better way to travel, for sure. That's nice. You know, in the fall, I often walk off the beaten path. You wouldn't believe the colors that are on the land, and the things that you see that you've never seen before. Like I've seen those little frogs. They're full grown, but they're only that big, and they stick. They stick on the sides of stuff or on fern. I've seen spiders that look really scary. They're white with a red streak down the center of them. And they're on white plants, some of them. You see this type of rock? That's, when they're made like that, like this, I don't know how big it is, but that's the kind I think that might be good for ceremony. These, no. Some rocks have got a lot of clay in them, and whenever they heat up, they might explode. And it's never happened to me because I'm so careful about it. But I've heard of it, a rock exploding in a sweat lodge. It's we need to think about ceremony. And when you do ceremony, it's such a great place to come into the forest to do your meditation or your prayer and to take it seriously. One day I imagined myself going up to a teenager, like let's say a 15 or 16-year-old teenager, and including my own grandchildren, and if I say to them, what can you tell me about your spiritual beliefs? And I wonder how they would answer. You know, would it take them 5 minutes to answer? Would it take, could they speak about their spiritual belief for several hours? Could they speak of their spiritual beliefs all day? I don't think so. A human being is curious about spirituality. Whenever they're 3 years old, they start asking questions. If you talk to them about spirit, I'll give you an example. One time I had my folder with my eagle feather in it, and my granddaughter Alyssa said, "Grandpa, what is that?" And I said, "It's a holder for my eagle feather." And she says, "Well, what's an eagle feather?" And I showed her, and she said, "What do you use it for?" I said, "I use it to pray." And so I explained a lot of things to her that day. She was very attentive. I'm going to share a memory that I have of a dream. This dream actually happened. I like to hold tobacco and I speak of it. I dreamed one night after my sobriety began, maybe within 2 years or whatever. And in the dream, I'm in a place of corridors. The corridors are maybe from that tree to where Janet is wide. And I'm walking along, and there's people wearing long white robes, and they're walking to and fro. They're walking towards me, and they're walking by me. And in the dream, I've got an orange. Whenever I speak of that dream in my play bloodline, I say to the audience that it was a rattle, but in the dream it was an orange. Really, it was an orange. And the people are going this way and that way, and they're looking me very sternly at me. And in the dream, I'm wondering, what are you looking at me like that for? I didn't do anything to you. Why do you stare at me like that? The ones that are walking towards me, that's the way they're looking at me. The ones that are walking by me, they're looking at me like that too, as if there was something disgusting about me. And then I take the orange, and I don't peel it, but I take a bite out of it. And right away, all the people that are around me, they stop and they come towards me, and they put their fingers in my face. "You're not supposed to do that. You know you're not supposed to do that. Now you're in trouble. Now you're in big trouble. Now you're going to pay for doing that. You got no right to do that." And they're screaming at me, and I want to get away from them. And there's a door, and I open the door, and I step out into a forest. So I'm in the forest, and I see a partridge. I'm at peace now. I'm at peace. The corridors are no more there. Those people with the long white robes aren't there either. But I see a partridge. And the partridge is moving on the trail ahead of me. And somehow that I know that the partridge doesn't have any flesh, no bones, no heart, and no blood. But yet it's moving. In the dream, I want to know why it's able to move when it doesn't have any, when it's hollow. So my intention is to take a rock and throw it at the partridge and hopefully to hit it so I could study it. And I get a rock and I'm just going to line up to shoot at it whenever something distracts me in a tree branch, and I stare away for a minute, then I look back to where the partridge was and it's gone. So I spoke to this, like I say, I was only about 39 maybe when I had that dream. And I spoke to elders, and the elders that I talked to said this. They said, the partridge represents you, and at this time in your life, you are hollow of spiritual substance. You need to acquire some spiritual substance. So that's when I started traveling to Thunder Bay for ceremony, to Temagami, and many ceremonies. Even though I was very poor, I'd saved my money to be able to go to Purification Lodge ceremonies, to fasting ceremonies. I've done so many fasting ceremonies. I've done over 50 fasting ceremonies, many of them 4 days and 4 night commitments. So I was 20 years went by, and one day I was visiting some friends, and it was the second week of December. And these old people that I used to visit, I used to go and have breakfast with them every 5 or 6 weeks. Anyway, they live in the countryside, and their house is about maybe almost 800 feet off the road. They got their own laneway, and I came out of their farmhouse, and there was a partridge. It was about 40 feet from me, and I crouched down like this, and I said, "Come and say hello to me." I said, "Partridge," we say Pinay. I said, "Pinay, come and say hello to me. You know I'm not going to hurt you." And the partridge walked over and over, and my hand was but this far off the ground, and the partridge's beak touched my fingertip, and I picked it up and I had it in my hands, and the partridge was going like this, so then I went like that, and the partridge flew off into a nearby forest. I went into the house, and because those old people that I was visiting, they were very elderly, and they had each a rocking chair at the window. They each had a window, and they would sit in the rocking chair and look out. So I knew that they'd probably seen that. I went in, I said, "Hey, did you guys see that? I picked up that partridge out there." And the old lady said, "I think it was drunk." Because eating fermented berries. I said, "I don't know if it was drunk or sober. But I just know for a fact that I have never heard of anybody picking up a wild partridge before, and I did." So anyways, I left. So I'm driving home, and then it hit me that the partridge that I picked up and felt in my hands was the partridge from my dream. And it came to say, "You have acquired spiritual substance. You are full now." And that's the way I read it. And that actually happened, so it was a pretty awesome experience for me. You see that white birch laying on the ground over there? And you know, whenever I said about a pine tree, and it'll be enormous, and that bottom half will still be standing there for I don't know how long, then all of a sudden it will fall one day and it'll be laying on the ground like that. And many years will go by, and moss will grow over the top of the pine tree, and every year it sinks a little bit lower into the earth. And many years, it goes down, and then it's going to be flat, and the soil will be rich where it decayed. I remember I used to hear partridge drumming, because the partridge is a great spiritual helper of mine. And I was fasting for 4 days and 4 nights in Temagami on a place we called Medicine Mountain. And I'd heard partridge drumming before, but I never ever saw what they did to drum. So one dawn I'm there, and then I hear a drumming. And I look, and there was a partridge, and he drummed, and he went to another place on the log, and after a short period of time it went back to where it was, and I saw it, and I'm holding this tobacco honestly. It made a circle, and then it stretched itself as tall as it could be. It was so stretched that its neck feathers are open, and its tail feathers are usually like this, but then its tail feathers open into a fan, and the fan goes down like this and touches on the moss of the log as if to try to push itself even a little bit taller. And then once it's in position like that, he opens this, because only the rooster partridges do it. The partridge opens his wings, and he beats his wings with such force that it makes a drumming sound, like tum 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 tum. It sounds like that, and it does that for a bit, and then goes back to where it was, and it does that all day. The partridge has a bag in its breast. All of them have it. And if a hunter harvests a partridge, and let's say that bag is this big in their breast, and the bag, they eat pine needles, they eat berries, they eat whatever they eat, it's in that bag. And if when the hunter harvests a partridge, and if that bag's not damaged, you could blow it up and into this big. and then you tie it, and then you hang it, and it's going to dry and become hard. And because it's dry, all the things in it are dry too. And then you tie it on a little stick, and the baby can play with it to have a rattle, right? And I was really amazed when I discovered that. Anyway, that's why the partridge could stay for several days drumming, because whenever they get hungry, they just bring something up from that bag into their mouth, and they chew it and digest it. So anyways, whenever I got back home, and at that time, Kirsten was maybe 5 years old. Maybe it was the summer or the fall that she had just turned 6. And I told her all about what the partridge did. And Kirsten says to me, why does the partridge do it? And I said, well, he's a boy partridge, and he wants the girl partridges to know where he is. I said, he's looking for a date. And Kirsten said, that's gross. I said, no, it's grouse. A grouse is not gross. Is it? Sometimes there's a plant and it has a leaf like that, and I don't think that's it though, but there's a root, and it's called a dapanic. And the old guy where I bought some property from in Kitigan Zibi was the first one who showed me it. And it tastes like horseradish. It's white, and sometimes there's a little green tinge that comes to it. Whenever it's green, it's more harsh. But it's a small root, and it's maybe 1/4 of an inch in diameter. And it's really good to eat. And I was asking a lot of elders about it, and nobody knew what it was. But then I was talking to Jan Longboat about it, and she said it was a pepper root, some kind of a pepper root. Because the old guy told me, he said that our people, the Algonquins, they would mulch that root and they would put it on meat. And it's just like putting pepper on your steak, right? So the people knew everything about everything. Like there was nothing the Anishinaabe didn't have an honor song for. And that's a good thing to think about, the respect and honor they had for all these things in the forest. Things that are mostly been forgotten about, because that adapanic, like who knows about it? I would have never known about it till Howard told me. I remember one day I was at the cabin, and I saw Howard coming, and Howard was very elderly. And when he was a young man, he was working with horses in the forest, up in lumber camp, and his foot got caught in some certain way, and he was holding on to the horse, and whatever movement the horse made, all of a sudden it threw him like this, and his leg went around this way, but his foot stayed there, so it really crippled him. And in those days, there was no helicopter to take somebody to the hospital. It was in the lumber camp, many, many miles from towns or doctors. So that injury came back to really haunt him when he was old. So he usually traveled around on his four-wheeler. He didn't get on it and off it very much. So this one day I'm at my cabin and I see Howard coming. He used to like to come and visit. We always had a lot of laughs together. And I saw him stop his four-wheeler, and there was a tree that was leaning over the trail, and that's where he stopped. I saw him get off his machine, and he opened the box that he had in the back of his four-wheeler, and he took out an axe, and he went up to the tree, and he had the blunt side of the axe, and he went bang on the tree. I saw him do it. Then he stood there for a couple of seconds, then he went back to the four-wheeler, put the axe away. Then he continued to where I was. So me and him are chatting away. And I said to Howard, I say, Howard, I saw when you were coming here, I said, you stopped over there. And I saw you get off your machine and you hit the tree over there with an axe. I said, what did you do that for? And Howard said, well, I wanted to see how healthy the tree was. He said, because if the tree was dying, he said, I saw that you were here. He said, I would have cut it down with my chainsaw and you would have been here to take the logs off the trail. But he said, the tree is healthy. And I said, and you know how healthy a tree is by hitting it with an axe and hearing the sound that it makes? He goes, yeah, don't you? No. But he was surprised that I didn't know that, because that's just knowledge, right? You know, fall time is coming. And I remember one time I was walking to my cabin, and it was probably late October and might have even been a couple of days into November. But I was walking to about 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sun was landed at a certain place in the sky, and it had yet to be in the area where the trail was. And I came across a snake, a pretty big garter snake, and the snake was waiting for the heat of the sun to limber it up so it could continue to wherever the snakes go in the wintertime. The snake needed that to move ahead. So I sat right down beside the snake and I said to the snake, if I was a coyote or a hawk or a weasel, you wouldn't be able to escape, because the season has that kind of power over you. It has stopped you from going from point A to point B. And I got up and then I continued on my way, and I went to the cabin, let's say for a few hours. Whenever I came back, the snake was gone. By then the sun had passed over the trail and it had went on its way. Whenever I went to Millhaven that Monday morning to talk with the inmates, I told the inmates that. I said, never give anyone or anything that kind of power over you, like the season has over that snake. That snake wanted to go to point B, but it wasn't able to do so. I said, you guys, if you make rehabilitation goals, whatever you want to make of yourself, make your plan, and then don't let anyone or anything stop you. Don't give anybody that kind of power. And that's what I taught them that day. Another time, I just got one more story, then we'll move along. Another time I was, this teaching came to me. I was in Old Montreal for some R&R. For some reason, I like going to Old Montreal. And I was walking along the sidewalk, and there was a silversmith selling his wares. There was nobody else, no other peddlers, just him. So I stopped and I looked at his table, and I saw there was a silver ring, and it was a two-headed snake. Not two heads at one end, but a head on each end. So I don't know why he made a ring like that, but I know the teaching that came to me just like that, immediately. So I bought the ring, and on Monday when I was talking to the inmates, I passed the ring around so they could study it. And I told them, I said, let's imagine that there's a snake like that. It's got a head on each end. One head has big fangs, and it's violent. The other head doesn't have fangs, and it's passive. Now, if there was a snake like that, the only way that it would survive is if it had the ability to communicate to the other one something. Because the one with the head with the big fangs, if it bit the other one, it's only hurting itself, because it's the one entity, right? It's all the one snake. So I said, imagine that a snake like that, and in the morning after it's rested, one head says, today I want to go east. And the other head says, well, I want to go west. And if they fought about it all day, they'd never get anywhere, and they'd die out. So the only way that they would have a chance of survival is one head to communicate with the other one why they should go east as opposed to west or north or south. The best ability to communicate, because if proper communication occurs, there will be less of a chance or no violence at all, as long as proper communication occurs. So I said that to the inmates, and I told them, I said, just think about that. Instead of violence, just communicate instead and see what happens. So the best artist, the best tattooer rather of J-Unit was an Indigenous guy from Toronto. And he come up to me and he says, hey Albert, I really connect with that story you told about the two-headed snake. I said, yeah. I said, do you think you could make a design of it? He said, I'll give it a whirl. So about a month later, he handed me an 8x10 piece of paper with a design. I said, wow, this is beautiful, man. He said, well, I'm giving you that. And I said, someday I'm going to get this tattooed on my arm. And there it is. So this one has big fangs and this one doesn't. But it's all about the communication, right? And how teachings come, because that came to me just like that at the and for sharing when I happened to be working with dangerous, violent young men. Like 80% of them were in their 20s. So I used to be really scared of snakes. For no reason, I just was. If I was walking on a trail like this and if I saw a snake like that, I'd turn around, I'd go the other way. Honestly, my chest would tighten up at the sight of a snake. After my sobriety began, I did a lot of sunrise ceremonies in Gatineau Park. I'd be in the parking lot at 4:30 in the morning, and I'd walk into where I did ceremony. I'd mark out a circle, and so this one day, and it's 5:15 in the morning, and I'm starting to do my prayer. I've got my tobacco in my hands, and I felt that somebody was watching me. So I'm thinking it must be an early morning hiker. So I'm looking all around because there's hills and things, and I'm expecting to see somebody looking at me, but I couldn't see anybody. So I went back to prayer. Then I still felt somebody was looking at me, and so then I started looking closer to where I was, and there was a snake just right beside me. So he was in my circle. And I said to the snake, I said, you know, I've always been frightened of you, even though you've never bitten me. You've never flung yourself in the air and wrapped yourself around my neck. You've never hurt me, and I'm afraid of you. But this morning you've come into my circle. So never more will I be afraid of you. So since that time, the snake is very important to me. Whenever I first was looking for a place to do my fasting ceremonies on my own land, I thought I found a good place, and I said, this is going to be a good place to do my fasting ceremony. But it's like something else said to me, no, keep looking. So I kept on looking. Then I came to another place. I said, this place might be suitable too. And then I saw a snake on the ground. I said, yep, this is the right place. Because, you know, a snake means change. You know, they shed that old skin, something that's not of use anymore. And the snake doesn't stomp to where it's going. It travels with a gentle caress. And the story that I heard is whenever Creator, at the time of the snake's creation, Creator said to the snake, what kind of feet do you want? And the snake says, I don't want feet. I don't want legs, I don't want feet. I want to be the closest to the earth. So, so that's, I like that story. Oh, I'll tell you a funny one. 2 springtimes ago, I've got a cupboard at home And the top of it is about this high, and there's 3 shelves, and they're spaced out, and I've got all my sacred items in there. 2 springtimes ago, I opened the closet door, the cupboard door, to get something from my sacred bundle, and I saw about this much of a tail of a snake disappear into my artifacts. So I closed the cupboard, and I went outside, and I sat in my chair outside, and I said, gee, there's a snake in my house, and it's not only in my house, but it's in among my sacred items. I said, well, I got to get it out of there. So I went back, opened the cupboard door. It was on the top shelf, and how they do that, I don't know. Anyway, so I knew which end it was at, so I started taking stuff out from one end, working towards where the snake had been. And I cleared out the whole shelf, no sign of the snake. Cleared out every shelf, no sign of the snake. So then I looked beside the cupboard, and there was a snake. So I grab it, I bring it outside, and I threw it on the ground. I wished it well. And in my mind, I'm thinking, the tail of the snake I saw is not the same, but it can't be. They're impossible to be 2 snakes. So let's say about a week passed, and I opened the cupboard again, and what do I see on top of my rattles is my sister, I took a picture of it. My sister said, she texted me back and said, it's a milk snake. They're brown, they're 2 colors of brown, like a malty brown and then a dark brown. It's got a nice design, and the snake was about this long. So whenever I saw it on top of my rattles, I didn't want to risk it getting away again. So I just grabbed it like this. So about this much of his head is sticking out here, then about this much of his tail is there. And I took him outside, and I put it on the ground and wished him well. So I texted Maria in Saskatchewan, and I told her, I said, I found 2 snakes among my sacred items. And she says, oh, Albert, a sorcerer has something against you. There's somebody, either the sorcerer has something against you, or somebody that has something against you has hired a sorcerer to do harm to you. I said, well, I don't see it like that. And she says, well, you live in the east, but if there was a snake here in your house, it could be a rattlesnake. And I said to her, I said, well, this is a wannabe rattlesnake because it's on top of my rattles. So I got to draw a snake with its tail holding a rattle, and I got to send her the picture. But that's true, you know. And I don't mind snakes, but please stay out of my house. Yeah, even the dead are important in the forest. They add to the mystery of it, the beauty of it. I've got a little place near my cabin where my house is. It's not far in the forest, and I go there, and I brought 2 chairs. So the first time I'm there, I'm sitting in the chair, and something touches my neck. So I look to see what it is, and it's a balsam fir tree. I don't know if you know much about them, but whenever there's lots of balsam fir trees together, the bottom branches often die. So so one of the bottom branches of the balsam fir was touching my neck. And right away I said to myself, the dead can still touch the living, because this is proof of it. And whenever we know that the dead can still touch the living, then we know that our ancestors can still have contact with us, physical contact with us. Them, it's the spiritual, and us is the physical, but they have the ability to touch us with medicine and with healing. I think you guys know about my chronic back pain. Well, I also had 4 inches of collapsed nerve, and my arm was like this, and the nerve specialist was Dr. Peter Preston. And the doctor said that my arm would never fully recover, and that I would live the rest of my life like this, with my arm like this. Like I could push it down like that, but then it would come like this, and I could open my fingers, and then they'd just go like that, right? And I didn't accept it, so I made a a plea to that relative of mine who knew medicine more than anybody else in the community, whoever that relative was, male or female. I didn't need to know their name. I just said, that relative of mine, of my bloodline, who knew medicine more than anybody else, I need you to come to my side and doctor my arm. Because everybody has such a relative, because the bloodline goes so far back. That relative maybe is alive now or lived 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, but we all have such a relative that knew medicine more than anybody else. So I called on that relative, and I also went to where the rapids are, and I sat in the rapids, and I made a tobacco offering to the spirit of the river for the same healing. And I'd heard that a wounded animal will rub its wound on Mother Earth, and it's like them, they know that that truly is their mother, and they make a request for healing to come from there to whatever their wound is. So I did that too. And within a few weeks, my fingers started to move just like that. And so eventually I got full use of my arm after a couple of months. And whenever Dr. Preston, whenever he saw that the movement of my fingers was getting better and better, I told him what I did. I said, I summoned the doctoring of a relative in the spiritual world. And Dr. Preston said, Albert, that relative of yours could walk on water. And I said, well, maybe he or she did in February when the lake was froze over, but that was the only time. That's not that they had the ability to walk on water, but there was love, and unconditional love and unconditional support of that person who knew medicine more than anybody else that came and doctored my arm. It's like I say, you know, about ancestors. Imagine that 300 or 400 years from now, a descendant of yours, somebody of your bloodline calls to you and says, grandmother, I'm in a state of emotional distress and I need you to come by my side. And you hear that call. Are you going to go, well, I'll go as soon as I finish my tea. You're going to go right away, right? Because they're calling you by their side. And I know I would, and I know somebody did for me too. And that it's not because they can walk on water, it's just because they love you unconditionally. Sometimes in places like this, you'll see a water snake because they like a place where there's rocks. An old guy told me about water snakes because I saw a big water snake. It had to be, honestly, it was at least 5 feet, 5 feet long. It was big, and in two places it had two like rounds in it. And an old guy told me, here's what the water snake will do. So let's say that the loon has a nest, and there's 3 babies in the nest. So the water snake will go by and say, oh, don't worry about me, I'm not interested in you. And do it many times, and at first the loon is very nervous about the presence of that snake. It's fearful, and it's ready to defend its eggs or its little ones. And the water snake just goes by, oh, it's just me again, don't worry about me. But then one day, because by then the loon is comfortable with leaving her little ones unattended for whatever reason, the water snake sees that and swallows a couple of them. It's a good thing to think about the trickster, you know. Anyways, if there's questions, you could ask questions, or else we could just wait till we get in the circle after, and you could talk about what you learned that was maybe connected with it. And if your feeling was, Albert, I didn't learn anything, just say so. I'm very connected with the white birch, I think, because I know that we made great canoes. My father used to say the Algonquins made the best birch bark canoes. And I know for a fact, somebody just didn't wake up one morning and say, today I'm going to start working on a birch bark canoe. Somebody saw it in a vision during ceremony. They saw it and they said, wow, we need that thing. And then they set to work on constructing it after ceremony. And so any tree that's so connected to us, to the Algonquins, I would like to, because, you know, we did artwork with it, with birch bark biting. We made big baskets that we could boil stuff in. You know, you take the basket is waterproof. You put water in it, then you put rocks, you know, clean rocks that are hot, and you put them in, then you scoop them out, put other ones until the water's boiling. And then you put your meat in. You could cook ducks and geese and chunks of moose meat and wild rice and everything in there, right? We didn't have iron pots. There was a genius among our people. I remember my father saying one time that when he was courting my mother, that he had this sore throat for, he said he couldn't even remember how long he'd had it. And one day he was over at her house, at her parents' house, and he spoke about the sore throat that he had. And he said Grandma Brazo went to their cold storage. They dug a hole in the ground and they put logs over it so that animals, they couldn't get in there. And that's where they kept making things like maple syrup and mushrooms and powdered berries and medicines in there. So she got out the skunk medicine. You know what skunk medicine is? It's from the skunk's scent gland. And one drop, you only take one drop. You don't want to take two. So you got one drop, and you put it on a piece of, like an inch square of bread, for instance. You put that one drop in there, you roll it into a ball, and you throw it in your mouth, and you hold it in your throat as long as you can. Then you swallow it. And it's going to cure you of many things. It cures influenzas and all kinds of stuff like that. Chest and lung infections. And then was my father said he took it, and he said a couple of weeks later he was back there, and my mom's mom says to him, Ernest, how is your sore throat? He goes, oh, geez, I just realized I don't have it anymore. So he was healed of his sore throat. And so I was up at Cocumville, where the Algonquins were, probably around 1992. And there was a white man that was there, and he had set a trap for a fisher, because he wanted to make a hat with the hide of a fisher. So he come back from his checking his trap, and Joe Wawati said to him, did you catch a fisher? He said, no, but I caught a skunk. And it was a leg hold trap. And Joe says to me, he says, Albert, you always wanted to try that skunk medicine. He says, well, today you're going to have your chance. So we went to where the trap was, and there was the poor skunk, and his leg is caught. And the chain was there, then the thing was on a stick that was maybe that high into the ground, like the stump of a tree, like a small sapling that he had cut and put the trap there. Anyway, Joe said to me and that other guy to make some commotion, and the skunk, it's like it has a gun with only one bullet. So it's not going to shoot for nothing, right? So the skunk, it turns its business end towards the threat. So me and the guy are over there. Meanwhile, Joe is there, and he's got a long stick with a little hook thing on it, and he's able to get the hold of the ring of the chain thing and lift it up. And now he's pulling the skunk. So the skunk is by the leg like this here, and the skunk is being pulled. Joe's pulling it, and because the skunk is being pulled, he still doesn't spray, because he's got that one bullet, and what's he going to spray? that's holding it, right? So we took it from there, and we went about 2 kilometers to where there was water. And Joe walked into the water with the skunk, and once the skunk is in the water, it couldn't spray even if it wanted to. It just can't in water. If it's under the water, it can't. So then Joe took a hold of the skunk, his back, and he pushed it under the water. And he had his watch, and he held it under the water for 3 minutes, and then he pulled it out, and he put his thumb where the heart of the skunk is, and it still had a heartbeat. So he pushed it down again for another 3 minutes. Then when he pulled it out, it was dead. We brought it back up to the summer kitchen, and Joe got a little piece of plywood, and he skinned the skunk, and he took its scent gland out, and he tacked it onto the board, that little board, and then he slit the scent gland, and one drop after the other started to come out, and he had a little jar, and the drops fell into the jar. So then after that, he says to me, he says, you want a drop of this? I said, yeah, I do. So me and him took each a little square of bread, and he put a drop on each of it, and we took that. And I didn't get a cold that winter. and whenever you burp, that's all you smell is the skunk. Or if you fart, it smells like skunk. So people, if you burp someplace, and people say, "You smell a skunk?" No, I don't. I was up in the park with those Algonquins, and they had a boy there named Willis, and Willis was Irene's grandson. Irene was Lena's daughter. They were both really wise and knew all kinds about medicines. And Willis had got a rash. And he went to the doctor, he went to the hospital, and they prescribed lotions and ointments, but nothing was removing the rash. So Irene took a galvanized pail, and there was about this much water in the pail. And she told Willis, she said, I want you to go into the forest and collect some toads. She says, I'll tell you where to find them. So she told him where he was more likely to find toads. And she says, whenever you find a toad, you tell the toad, my grandmother needs you for medicine, and whenever I'm going to bring you back. And you make an apology to the toad, and you make an offering to the toad. So Willis did that. Willis collected, 7 toads, whatever amount, and he brought them back to Irene. And then Irene, she had that pail, and all the toads are in the pail, in about this much of water. Then she took, it was a galvanized pail, and she took a metal serving spoon, and she went bang, 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 bang on the side of the pail. And the toads are in there, and they get so panicky and scared that they pee themselves. Okay, so their pee mixes with the water. So then Irene took a cloth, and she dunked it in that water, and she gave Willis a sponge bath. And it sealed up all the rash right away almost. It started to be a difference right away from that. So I mentioned that to a researcher of Indigenous cultures. I said, well, what do you think of that story? He said, well, it makes a lot of sense because toads can live where other things can't. And he said, because they've got a high immune system. Their immune system is like sky high. And he said, anything that's got a good immune system like that, their pee is medicine, like the scent gland of a skunk too, right? And I said to the researcher, I said, gee, if the white man ever finds out about that, they're going to bottle it and sell it and burn it. They might be able to harvest that skunk, that toad mixture, he says, but the most important part, they won't know what to do about it. They said, what important part is that? He said, the ceremony. The ceremony that's connected to, and the respect, because Willis brought the toads back to where he'd found them, right? Anyway, there's so much stories about medicine and that people just don't know about. It's like somebody said about like a drum. Before you do a ceremony with it, all it is wood and a hide stretched over it. It's not sacred until it's used in ceremony. The same thing with a pipe. Like I know this guy he sold a pipe at a powwow. And he said this guy come up and started yelling at him, "How dare you sell a sacred item like that?" And this guy from Kitigan Zibi said, "How dare you come and tell me that this is sacred? This is just a piece of stone and a piece of wood at this time. You've got to use it in ceremony, and once you do that, then it becomes sacred. Then no money will buy it. No amount of money will buy it."